If you enjoy this show, please share, rate, and review. The more listeners, the greater the impact. Annetta Caldwell is a wife, mother, dancer, and author passionate about sharing God's faithfulness. A Texas native, she trained in dance and ministry with Youth on a Mission, where she met her husband Ryan. They moved to Virginia in 2007, where they've raised 7 of their children. Annetta now teaches others to worship through dance and shares her testimony through writing and speaking, helping others find freedom through God's redemptive power. Her book, Caught, is her story of overcoming drugs and the occult and walking into the loving arms of Jesus when she finally surrendered. Boom, boom goes a thunder. Everybody goes a rain. Boom, boom goes a thunder. Everybody goes a rain. Here I am. Boom, boom goes a thunder. Look at me, I'm alright. Everybody goes a rain. In the storm, dancing to the rhythm of the rain.
Welcome home, where healing and restoration are celebrated in stories from those who have walked through fire and come out the other side. Welcome to the Pursuing Redemption podcast with Heather Shore.
Well, Annetta, thank you so much for coming on the Pursuing Redemption podcast. We're excited to have you today.
Thank you. I'm excited too.
Yeah. Well, I would love to hear about your upbringing and your life through high school. You can go into as much or as little as you want to, but it was a fascinating story.
Okay. Yeah. Well, when I started my story, it was about how I grew up in a dysfunctional family. So I started out like somebody in my family started abusing me from like the age of 3 till about 12. And so that was pretty much what I knew as a little kid until for a long time. My dad was Muslim and my mom was kind of like backslidden Christian. And then my brothers and my sister, like there was nobody really that were Christians. My grandmother was a Christian, but she lived about 3 hours away. We saw her every summer. But that was pretty much the only Christian influence I had. And so that's probably part of the way God got me out of some of the stuff was my grandmother's prayers. But yeah, I pretty much started looking for acceptance and stuff from friends outside of our family because I was kind of like the black sheep in the family. So everybody else was very like driven, successful. Like even now my brother's an engineer. My sister was like a CPA. My other one is like traveling all over the world. So I was like, well, I like to dance and that's about it. So yeah, I pretty much grew up feeling pretty much on the outside. And so I was constantly looking for friendships and to be accepted. And that's part of what led me into the alcohol too. And so like 5th grade is when that door opened. And I was at a friend's house and we broke into her dad's liquor cabinet. And that's when I was like, oh, this is kind of exciting. And it was taking my mind off of all the abuse and everything that I had been going through. And that pretty much from 5th grade onto like middle school, that was when I started getting really big into alcohol. And then witchcraft, that door got opened about 7th, 8th grade through parties and through a couple of twin girls I actually met in middle school.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to go into that a little bit of like what happened with witchcraft and then experimenting with drugs? Obviously, each of these things sort of led to the next. Yeah.
Yeah. So whenever I was in middle school, kind of one of the big events that kind of pushed me over the edge was there is this popular group that I really wanted to be a part of. They were the cool kids. And I never really was. I'd wear like bright blue eyeshadow and like bright yellow outfits. And then my friend was like, Annetta, you need to dress different. And so I started going down this path of trying to win acceptance from other people. And there's this group that, okay, so there's this guy in my book, his name is Max, and I think you read about him. He he was very short, like probably 4 foot or smaller. And he he had a crush on me, but he was with the cool kids, right? So I ended up saying I wanted to, he said he liked me, and so I said I wanted to date him so that I can get in with him. And what happened is I went to a party that they invited me to, and at the party, Max shows up. He has like these bodyguards, which was really crazy. And he opened the door, and him and his friends came in, and everybody starts clapping. Like the celebrity comes in, they're like, Max is here. And he's like, I'm here. And I'm like, oh, wow, he's the one that I'm going to go out with. And he's like, Annetta, will you go out with me? And I'm like, yeah. And everybody's all cheering. And I was like, what in the world have I gotten myself into? But I was trying to be popular. So I ended up hanging out with them that night. And after an hour of dating him, I decided to break it off at the party. So I went to him and I was like, I'm sorry, but I don't really have feelings for you and I need to break it off. And people got so mad because he was the most popular guy in the group. And I, went to sleep. Everybody left, and I was alone in this girl's house. I didn't even know her, but she was another big popular person. And when I woke up in the morning, my hands were super glued and my feet were super glued and my new outfit
Wow.
had super glue all over it. And I realized they did it in the middle of the night as a revenge for me breaking up with Max. And so when I went to school that next Monday, everybody hated me. Like my friends that I left for the popular kids, and the popular kids are all glaring at me and like, can't believe you did that to Max. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I was in a pretty bad place socially when this all happened. And then there's these two girls, like I said, the twins that showed up, and they were just out of the box. They did not match these kids. They weren't like unpopular, but they weren't popular. And I didn't know they would talk to me because everybody at school hated me at this point. I had no friends. I was like, nobody wants me. And they were like, we don't care what they think. We'll be your friend. And I was like, okay. So we started hanging out, and they were heavily involved in witchcraft, cocaine, um, maybe some heroin, different things. And they started welcoming me into their whole circle, like their whole group. And when they introduced me to a witch, and she actually came to my 8th grade party. So this is like, I didn't think anybody show up, and like a few people showed up, and then she did. And in my book, I talk about this. She showed up and said, hey, we can make this a real exciting night. And she started pulling out tarot cards. And then she started saying, why don't we go even bigger and get a Bible? And then I think it was a satanic Bible that she had, or book. And she told us to start rubbing them together. And then I don't even know what all kind of spelled. It was crazy. And I remember feeling this fear that I've never felt before. And it was in our house. And we went to the back room, and a couple of friends saw this poster. The poster looked like it was coming alive. And I told my friends, is this just me, or does this poster look like alive? And they were like, no, it does. And, so we freaked out. And I told my sister, and she's like, you got to calm down. Everything's okay. And I just knew there was something had shifted, because not only we were doing that, but when we'd go to their house afterwards, we would start trying to talk to spirits and try to make things move by a specific name of a spirit. We'd ask him to do things for us. And so it was like this whole new world was opening up, and I was excited, but I was also really scared. And it just snowballed. So from Ouija boards, that started coming up again, from a party, and I started getting heavily involved in that. And it was just like the snowball. All of a sudden, I started getting introduced to more people, and it was like the more people I met, the heavier and deeper they were into witchcraft. So it was like almost like a setup. The enemy's like, here, this is okay. You can go play this little game. Oh, you can get your palm read. And then from there, all of a sudden, before I knew it, I was on a table at a party, and dedicating myself to Satan, because they said, we need like a willing person to get on the table. And I said, okay, I'll do it. And that was with another group of friends. And they did like some kind of ritual thing on me. And then the fear was through the roof, because I
Sure.
actually asked Satan to, dedicating myself to him. And that was like ninth grade at this point. And
So you're like
from
14 years old at that
I was
point?
I was about 14 when I did that.
Okay.
So from there, I started dressing in all black and very emo, that black lipstick and the trench coats. And I was just going further and further. I started cutting myself. I tried to commit suicide a couple of times in there. And the only relief I had was cutting myself, because I was like, this is, and drinking every day. So there's a group of people. I didn't do hard drugs yet. I was just like, I'll just do alcohol and different things. And this new group I met, they're ones that were all emo and stuff. They took me and they started introducing me to more drugs, and they said, or to drugs, and they said, hey, this will make you feel better. Because I was crying every day and I was like not functioning. And they're like, this will make you feel better. And that's the group that I actually, did the dedication with. From there, I met another couple of people, and they said, we started talking about how we can become witches. And I don't know if I'm going too fast through this, but
no, this is great. No, keep going. Yep, that's perfect.
Whenever I met with them, they said, hey, there's a difference between white witches and like, I guess the black witch, whatever. They said the white ones are okay. We can do this if you're nervous, about going into white witches, And I was like, are you sure it's okay? She's like, yeah, but we do have to do a few things. So that's when we started cutting and drinking each other's blood. And that was like at our house, and we included another guy in that. And that just opened this crazy door where I was like, oh my gosh, now not only are we, doing drugs, and drinking constantly, now I'm drinking, friends' blood to try to dedicate myself even further into witchcraft. And it got so bad that one time we were downtown in Austin, because that's where we'd hang out with everybody, like crazy people.
Okay.
And I saw a guy on a motorcycle, and I remember this from my book. He stood out to me. And I think he was probably a warlock, because I was just drawn to him. And I just asked him if I could drink his blood. And he said, okay. And he got a knife out, cut himself, and I drank his blood. And my friends were like, what are you doing? Like, you don't even know that guy. And I was like, I know, I just decided to do it. And I didn't know anything about him. So I'm very thankful that the Lord spared me from some heavy diseases or something.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't know anything about him. I'm like, good grief. So, yeah.
That is wild. So can I ask, where are your parents in this whole thing? Like, are they noticing that these things are going on with you?
My mom.
Or that you're getting darker and darker, right?
Yeah.
And you're more withdrawn.
Yeah. And just I'd be high constantly coming home, and my mom did get worried about me. So she tried to take me to like a drug center, and she was telling me she's just taking me out somewhere, but she didn't tell me where. And when I found out that where she was taking me, I actually physically jumped out of the car when she was driving, and I don't even know how I got home. I think I ran home or something. So she was like, she was worried about me. I was skateboarding everywhere. So at one point she took my skateboard away to try to keep me at home. And I just got mad at her and didn't use my skateboard. So I was like,
just full on rebellion at that point. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Just total rebellion.
So fast forward a little bit. So there, a little bit later in high school, you get invited to a church gathering. Am I remembering all of this correctly?
Well, I got invited. So like I said, drinking and doing drugs, even at the school campus, I was kind of known for, getting drugs from the dealers and stuff. There was one guy that approached me in school and in class, and he's like, I'm kind of worried about you. And he's like, I think you might have a problem with, and I was like, oh my gosh, one of my peers is coming to me. And he's like, it's okay. I used to have a problem and I got in AA or NA. And he was telling me this and I was like, oh, that's interesting, but I don't have a problem. I was like, I can stop anytime. And he was like, okay, well, maybe we'll talk about it later, but I do have a party I'm going to if you want to come. And I was like, well, yeah, I'm always up for going to a party. So I told my friend and she's like, are you sure? We don't even know this guy. And I'm like, oh, he's fine. So they come and pick us up in a pickup truck and we get in the back and they take us and they stop at a random place. And we're like, oh crap, what if these people are like psychos? When we get out and they said, okay, we're here for an AA meeting. And I was like, what? And I got so mad and I jumped out of the truck and just like, I'm just going to walk home. And my friend was like, I can't believe they thought that we needed that. I was like, I know. And so I knew where this place was because that takes place later in my story of.
Yeah. That's awesome. So keep going there. So tell us a little bit of like, you end up going to the AA meeting and then that's sort of how things start to change.
Well, before I went to that AA meeting, I was going back and forth trying to stop using. And when I would try to stop, my friends were like, you're so angry. I think you should go back on using the drugs or alcohol because you're so mad all the time. So I was like, no, I need to stay sober. And I would try to prove myself to, like, my mom gave me put me in counseling and she was like, or do you think you have a problem? I'm like, no, I can stop. So that was kind of my thing is I'll go a little bit and then I get really hard back into it. So this one weekend, they said they found a new dealer that has a new drug that we haven't tried and it's going to be amazing. And it's a street drug and none of us know what it is, but we're like, okay, well, we'll try something new. And that's just kind of how I just recklessly was living. And I told my friend, she's like, well, if you do it again, she's like, don't worry if you use drugs because I'll be here holding your hand the whole time. So you won't even have to worry, right? I'll be here. I'll be your support. You don't have to be afraid. Because I was like, when I did do drugs, it's like a love-hate relationship. And
Sure.
I would be feeling very excited to escape, but then I hated the out of control feeling I had. So it was like this love-hate thing where I was just like, I don't want to do it, but I have to function, So I went to this party and I said, okay, I'll do it as long as you stay with me, hold my hand through this, So we all take the drugs and my friend all of a sudden is on the floor laughing. And I'm like, well, you're supposed to be my support. And then she's totally out of it. And then I start seeing stuff that's like crazy, spiders everywhere, all this stuff. And it goes from, after a while, you're supposed to come off of these. Well, I wasn't coming down from it. And my friends were. And they're like, Annetta, you should already be like coming down from these. Like, this is kind of weird. And I was like, well, I don't know what's happening. And so anyway, it was like 24 hours later, I'm still high and my friends are not. And then it goes from that to like the third day. And I'm like still high. And I'm afraid that I'm going to become like one of those crazy people I see in Austin where they're talking to themselves and they never come off of the drugs. And I literally, like going on day 3, still as high as when I started. And so I went on my skateboard and I go into a little more detail in my book on this, but I basically got my skateboard and went downtown Austin. And I had prayed to God, even though I didn't know who he was. I was like, God, help me. Like when I was like 6 or 7, I would pray in my bed. I'd be like, God, help me, and I didn't get a lot out, but I would just try to talk sometimes for some reason. Well, this time I looked up and I realized like, I'm super high still. This isn't coming off. And I was like, God, if you're real, I need you to help me. Like, that's all I got out. And after I prayed that, I looked and I realized I was sitting in the same spot. This made me cry. I was sitting in the same spot that guy took us to for the AA meeting. I didn't even realize it. And I look up and that's where, and then I see the AA place just down the road because I knew where it was because it wasn't showing us that night. So I went in there and I'm the youngest one in there, young teenager. And I'm like, hey, I need to come off drugs and I need y'all's help. And they came in and they welcomed me and they were like, talked to me. And I was like very shaky and they told me to just keep coming back. And that was the start of getting sober from from everything.
That's a wild story, and amazing that, I mean, there are no coincidences.
Yeah.
I love it, you know? Tell us about, I mean, obviously that starts a journey into sobriety. And then how does that eventually lead to you making a decision to go into YWAM, which means you've become a Christian at some point?
Yes. So when I was in AA, they tell you like you can have a God of your own understanding, and you're searching. I was like searching. I was like, I want to know who the real God is. I don't want to just say this doorknob is my God, or this, paper clip is my, they say, because when they did AA, even though it was based on Christianity, they didn't want people that had been hurt by the church to not come. So they made it very wide open for people. And then it kind of grew from there, where people just have all kinds of different gods and things, that they believe in. But the big thing for me is I admitted that I had a problem and that only God could help me. And once I did that, then I started going, okay, God, you have to keep me sober. I mean, coming in shaking, you get like detox tremors and stuff. So I would be coming in even weeks after, just like uncontrollably shaking. And they were like, it'll go away. I'm like, okay, I hope so. And my body was getting back to normal. So that high started going away. Thankfully, God started healing me. And when I was there, I was like, God, if you're real, I need you to show me who you are. I need you to reveal yourself, right? And I prayed that. I'd go into the bathroom and pray it. I didn't care. I prayed everywhere. I had no shame. I was just like, get down on my knees. And I asked for him to help me provide a sponsor for me to help me go through the steps. And this one day I walked into the meeting, and this lady, she looked like she was glowing. She had this, like, every time she talked, it was like this peace, and I was like, I want what she has. So I came to her and I was like, will you be my sponsor? And she goes, well, I'll think about it. She was very selective and she wanted to know if I was serious. She told me later she didn't think I was going to make it. So she was kind of like, let's see if this girl's actually going to survive. So after she decided to take me on, I had been praying, like I said, that God would show himself. She told me the only thing that can help me overcome my fear was Jesus. And she was just point blank, Jesus is the only answer, because I had so much fear. So she's like, there's nothing else that's going to help you. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to keep figuring out if this is real or not, right? So my big story was on the bus. I ride the bus all the time. I worked part-time at a doctor that was actually a rehab doctor. Funny. Like he worked with alcoholics, and I came in high all the time and drunk.
Wow.
So he knew it, but he still kept me there. But I would ride the bus, and this one time I was sitting there, and this lady with a white dress and long blonde hair comes to me and she goes, hey, I just wanted to ask you, have you thought about, becoming a Christian? And she started just starting this random conversation. I'm looking around. I'm like, does anybody see this random lady with this long white dress on, like approaching me? And everybody, it looked like a movie. Like they're looking at paper, they're talking to each other. I kind of am looking over there like, can you see me? Can you see her? Nobody would even blink an eye with her. So she talks to me for a while. I get off the bus and I'm like, okay, God, I don't know if this is real, if this is who you are. So I go through this process of trying to figure out if this is really who God is. And it starts coming up with different places, right? So it's like, I can't get away from it. I get on the bus again, and this might be like another week or a week and a half. I don't remember exactly what, but she comes on the bus again, this long white dress, long blonde hair. And she's like, hi, have you decided if you want to follow Jesus? And I'm like, I'm still trying to figure it out. She goes, okay, well, and she starts talking to me about it. And she talks maybe like, I don't remember, 10 minutes or something. And then she gets off the bus and I'm like, okay. So I'm still struggling, trying to figure things out. And my family still kind of thinks that kind of crazy that I'm sober. I'm not like the party person that I was. So I don't think they're happy with me either being sober. But I'm like, okay, God, if this is you, I need to know. And there's something that like, so this one night I got in a parking lot. Like I said, I would just pray wherever. And I got on my knees and I said, you know what? I believe that you are who you say you are. You're Jesus, right? You're the only one that can set me free. And I was like, God, I believe that you died on the cross and that you rose again and that you can come live in my heart. And I asked for you to forgive me for all my sins. And I prayed this prayer by myself in a parking lot. And I was just like, just, help me. And I became a Christian that night. And I looked up and the clouds, I just say it's kind of this weird movie thing. The clouds separated a little bit when I looked up, and I was like, oh my gosh, So I got up from there and I told my sponsor, and she was like, oh, that's so good. And she was so excited. She's like, you're going to get baptized and all. So I get done telling them. And then when I get on the bus again, which again is like maybe like a week later, that lady comes again with the white dress, the blonde hair. And I say, I decided to follow Jesus. And she goes, that makes me so happy. She gave me a Bible. Why in the world did I lose that Bible? I do not know, but I lost this Bible. But she gave it to me and she said, read the Bible, make sure this and this. And she starts giving me advice. And she's like, again, I'm so happy you decided to do this. She gets off the bus and I never see her again.
Do you think she was an angel?
I do. I think she was an angel. And it was literally 3 times. And after I accepted Jesus, it's like her assignment was over. So I literally never saw her again after that. But yeah, so I went still doing AA. Now I'm a Christian. I get baptized. Now there's a lot to unpack here.
Sure.
Because the enemy is always like trying to sidetrack, especially since I gave my life to the Lord. All of a sudden, other temptations come up. And I don't know if you remember this part, but I get introduced to a cult.
That Bible
shortly
cult.
after I become a Christian. And I thought it was a normal church. And then all of a sudden I'm realizing everybody has not just like suggested, like if you're in their church, you have to wear a skirt. You have to sell off all your pants. And at first I'm like, is this, why do they do this? And my friend's like, well, we just believe that you're supposed to just wear, skirts or dresses. And I start getting involved in this church and my sponsor is like, Annetta, that's a cult. I'm like, it's not a cult. They're fine. And I'm like going to these like constantly, and they have like an almost like a commune thing. And I'm like, oh, and the part that's really funny is when I get introduced to this place, there's this lady that has this big white hair, like bun. And she was like, hey, would you like some biscuits? And I'm like, I'm sold. I'm like, yes, please. And they were the best biscuits I've ever had in my life. So I kept coming back to this cult, really. And I eventually sold all my pants and started wearing only skirts. I got baptized in their church. They started letting me speak on the stage. It was like I was getting very involved. I was like, they're not a cult. I don't know what people were praying, but one day my eyes got open and I went, oh my gosh, this is a cult.
Yeah.
And I decided to leave the church. And when I did, multiple people were like, I'm afraid you're going to go to hell. And I was like, what? They're going, yeah, because you're leaving our church and there's only a certain amount of people saved. And they were scaring me. And even this lady, I'd visit her in a nursing home and she was a part of that church, and she was like, I was like, oh, I decided not to go there more. She goes, oh, honey, I'm afraid you're going to hell. I was like, oh, well, I don't think I'm going to hell. I believe in Jesus. She's like, oh no, so I stopped seeing her. I was like, we're going to close this door. But I got out of it, thankfully. And then that was God just rescuing me. And he was putting on my heart to do missionary work. And I was always, my biggest fear was doing missionary work. I did not want to do it. And he's like, I got to this point where I'd go to church meetings and stuff. I got involved with a better church and they were healthy. And when I was there, it was like everywhere I went to conferences or different things, the Holy Spirit would be like, what about this? Missionary work, missionary work, missionary work. And I'm like, ugh. And one day I felt like the Holy Spirit was so strong. He's like, either you're going to follow me or you're not. And I was like, I'll follow you. So I opened up a magazine and I found a place to go to a missionary trip. And I called him and I basically asked the church I was going to sponsor me. They said yes for the whole thing. And I left Christmas Day to Florida, and then we went to Venezuela. I had no idea who they were. My family was like, "What are you doing? You're going to Venezuela? Like, you don't even know these people." I'm like, "No, I found it in a magazine."
Wow.
So that was the start. And then I had a roommate eventually that told me about YWAM, and then I raised money to go to YWAM, and that's where I met my
Your
husband.
husband. Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was a really sweet part of the book as well, where you talk about, just this journey of dating and meeting him and YWAM. But it worked because you are a mother of 7 kids,
Yes.
which
Yes.
that's a lot, which is awesome.
Thank you.
How did, I guess, maybe fast forward a little bit, how did that impact your journey, right? So obviously being, a new Christian in YWAM, you grow closer to the Lord, you meet your husband. That obviously is going to grow you as well in terms
Yeah.
of being a Christian. And then obviously having 7 kids
Yeah.
is quite the journey.
It was quite the journey. There was a lot of healing that I had to go through in YWAM. Not just from the abuse stuff, but as you know, in my book, there was attempted, well, there was somebody did kidnap me at one point, and then there was also a guy that tried to kill me at a bus stop. So that happened right before I went into YWAM, and that was me sharing the gospel with him, and I was not listening to the Holy Spirit. He said, "Stop walking
Yeah.
with him," and I kept walking with him. So when I got there, I was a wreck, but God started healing me. He started putting people in my path. I started getting prayer for lots of things. I just opened up a lot. And when I met Ryan, I just told him we were just friends. And I did not feel the same way. And it took like 3 different times I told him. And he said, "I'm not going to release the feelings in her until later," because he got a whole vision. I think I put that in the book. God gave him a vision of us getting married before, when he was just asking if he could date me. And he saw me coming out in a wedding dress on a hill. And so he was waiting. And then when when God finally released the feelings in me, we didn't actually date. We went from being friends to being engaged. So there was like, it was just, my leaders were like, "He's on staff. What are you doing? And you said you didn't like him, and all of a sudden y'all are engaged." And so that was a whole crazy testimony where I really felt like the Holy Spirit's who asked versus Ryan, because I was anyway, that's a crazy story where I was in the car. But yeah, so we got engaged, and we ended up whenever we did get married, I got pregnant pretty quick and had, my biggest fear was also childbirth. I did not want to have kids. I was scared to death of having kids. And God is so funny, because I have 7 now and waiting for 2 more. I was like, "You're really funny," because it's like, but he
Did
walked
that
with me.
fear start to dissipate with each childbirth? Like once you got through the first one, you were like, okay, I can
Yeah,
do this.
it was definitely better, because I know once I had, so Sarah was my first one. And once I had her, I remember afterwards, I was like, "God, how can I not trust you? Like, you just walked me through." That was the biggest fear that I had in my, like, growing up, since I was probably like 6 or 7. I was scared to death of having kids. And I would hear from people the pain, or, my mom would share kind of how hard it was having me. And for some reason, I just held on to that fear. So when I had her, I was just like, "God, you're so good." And I was like, yes, it was painful, but it was like the most uh bonding experience I've had with like, just the fact that I had her. And then I just remember her looking up at me and be like, "Are you my mom?" That's the way she looked at me. And I was like, "Ah." So God started changing me. But I mean, of course, there's a lot of healing that I still had to have, even with the babies, but it did get better. Like, Hannah was only 3.5 hours. Sarah was like 16. So it was but even emotionally, I mean, I still had some fear because of some doctor stuff I had that God's recently, in the last couple of years, has healed me from. But it was better. And I started realizing God, what he showed me, which is so cool, is that he was like so intimately involved in these pregnancies and deliveries. Like, it felt like I was going into a place that only me and him could go into. So it was like this
Mm,
intimate place, because
yeah.
I never had any epidurals or drugs or anything.
Oh,
And
wow. You are superwoman.
I was scared of getting of getting needles. So I was like, I don't want to get an epidural. So I had to rely heavily on him, and I would be like, God, just help me with this whole, like, I can't do this on my own. And so it's like my husband would disappear, the midwife would disappear, and it would just be me and Jesus, and I would just see him like holding me and like through each contraction. And so because we had this intimate thing, I started getting to a place where it's like I was excited because I was so close to him, because I was so needy to even make it through the pregnancy and the deliveries. And I had great pregnancies. It was like my body loved it. It was like my body was like, "Oh, I love being pregnant." And even though I threw up for the first, trimester, my body just operated different. Like it just, I felt more alive, and um just like I said, closer to him, because I had this revelation that he's the one knitting these babies together. And so it's like this partnership where you're getting to feel his artwork being formed inside of you, so
That's really cool.
it
Yeah.
was really cool.
One of the things I was curious about, because obviously you went through some really interesting stuff during middle school and high school, and then what you went through as a kid. How have you guarded your own kids from having to walk or go through anything like that? Mine are 9 and 11, and I know what I want to guard them from.
Yeah.
Different parts of my story. I hope they don't have to go through the same heartache. So, like, are there things that you're sort of guarding them from?
Yeah, I think, well, one big thing that was on my heart was homeschooling.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted my kids, that was one of the initial things, is I wanted them protected, because I knew when I went to school there wasn't a lot of fruit in being there. But in my situation, it was probably better for me to be in public school because of all the abuse at home. That was like my retreat, my relief, actually. But when they're here with us, like we're, godly family, it's like I wanted them to be with us. I wanted to be the one training them. I didn't want them to be sent off and then told, like, you don't know what, gender you are and all these different things. And so I was really like protective like that. But I've had to let them go a lot in the last few years. Obviously, I've had to be. So the one thing that God showed me was this like vision of them being butterflies. And he's like, release them to me. And when I did, I was at church, and this was like about 6 years ago. I opened up my hands and I was on my knees, and I just saw all of my kids fly. And then it was like straight to him, so it's like this letting them go, but at the same time realizing I'm not just letting them go to the world, I'm letting them go to him. And so that, even though I can't protect them from everything, that's been a big thing, is giving them over to Jesus constantly. And then there's practical things I've done, like we're pretty protective over the sleepovers. That's when I was exposed to the most, is at sleepovers. That's where I learned about Ouija boards. That's when I learned about all the different spells, all the different stuff, and even just the kind of things we talked about. And so I've always been really protective. Now I've kind of loosened up a little bit with the sleepovers, as long as I'm like, usually it's here. There's one party my daughter's going to, but she's like 13 now, and I'm like, I've let go a little bit. But that was probably one of the big practical things. And then the other thing, which I'm so excited about, is I had a friend write these books. It's kind of like about puberty and about how to handle your body changing and all these different things, but it's through a godly way. And so it's like a whole weekend getaway. So when they turn a certain age, I take them to like a hotel, or my other daughter went to, we went camping. We went to like a cabin, and we spend the weekend talking about these questions, and going through the book, and like, what does it mean to guard your heart from somebody? Like, you don't want to just give your kisses away, because it's like giving, these intimate parts of you away that you should save for your spouse. Or, these different conversations we can have about your period, and about how this is normal and natural. I never had that. Like, nobody talked to me about that. I had to find out from my friends. So I have this open door during that time. So it's like, y'all can ask me questions. You can say, what about this? And my big thing with that is conversation. And then they can come to me later, like, okay, this is going on in my life. But that weekend getaway, when they're close to that puberty stage, like it'll probably be closer to 12 with my other daughter. She's 11. So it'll probably be 11 and a half, 12, because things are getting sped up a little more right now. But getting that time away and having those conversations with them. And I would tell them, nobody can touch your private parts. These are your private parts. If anybody ever does, you talk to us. And I would emphasize, tell us anything. You're not going to be in trouble. I would just try to put it out there. And then I'll just randomly has anybody ever touched you here? Has this ever happened? Just to keep that conversation open, because I didn't have that open door to talk. And so if somebody would have said, hey, has anybody touched you here? Have they done? I would have been able to say, yes, actually they have. And there could have been healing in my life, even at an earlier age. And so even if something does happen to them, I want them to be like, yes, this is what's going on.
Absolutely. I started reading that book, Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, with my kids when they were little.
Yeah.
Like super little, like 3 and 4 years old. Because I just wanted them to know, like, if they ever stumbled across something, hey, you're not in trouble, but this could happen.
Exactly.
Just because kids are getting exposed to this stuff so much younger.
Yeah.
Like whether they're at school or at someone's home, like it's sort of crazy, that Satan's just coming after people at such a young age, but it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
So let's transition just a little bit here and talk about how you got introduced into deliverance and what your experience was like and what God really freed you from. Because you had obviously walked through quite a bit of trauma as a kid, and then going into witchcraft, that opened a lot of doors. So that would be a natural extension, becoming a Christian, to actually walk through healing and deliverance so you could be free yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. About 2.5 years ago, I got introduced to the Wences. And I think you know them, right? Because you did podcasts with them.
Yep.
So what I was finding out, even going through counseling, because I was going through counseling from like AA time, like when I was a teenager, like I've been going through counseling for, it feels like forever. But a lot of times it felt like I was dealing with the fruit, but wasn't dealing with the root of what was going on. Like, why do I keep having these thoughts? Why do I keep having these feelings? And it's just like, tell myself, don't do that. Don't think that. Don't do that. And then it just becomes like a, just a regimented thing instead of freedom. So I was at a point where I had been doing great counseling with somebody here that was trying to help me deal with a lot of the trauma. Like we would go back to memories from when I was really young. I think even some point there's somebody that said about going in even to the womb, like there's stuff that can happen that's spoken over you. And so there was a lot of healing before I met the Wences, and just to get the inner healing and be ready for this last step. So I had been doing all these things. I had been praying, and I had been just like, God, heal me. I'd be praying that over and over again, heal my thoughts, heal me of this, because it was like such a battle constantly. And when I met them, I had already read, like, there's a book they ask you to read. I think it was like When Pigs Move In. It was like one of those Dickerman. So I read that, and I filled out the surveys and stuff. And I had a friend already go through it. She goes, this might be good for you, because I was constantly going to her with, I have this fear, I have this. And she's like, this might be good. And when I, was going to, it was like so much warfare to even get there. Like, I think something happened to our car. My daughter started throwing up. I was like, I don't care. We gotta make it to their house. So I remember driving, and I went across the bridge, and it felt like everything in me was like, get out of here. Don't go over there. It's like almost like these voices are like, yeah, it's screaming. And I get to their house, and all of a sudden it was like, peace. And I was like, oh, I'm in the right spot. And when I got there, they showed my deliverance videos. There was so much. And some people don't have that much going on, but because of the kind of blood oaths I made, and because of the dedication to Satan, and because of the drugs, and I just opened so many doors that even though I was a Christian, they were still like hanging out there and tormenting me. And so they didn't have control over me, but they were influencing my thinking. They were, influencing, what I thought about stuff. And so when we went through it, it was like, even generational things that I didn't even know that was in my bloodline was being broken. And especially my dad being Muslim, which, I will talk about that too, but there's a whole heritage of all kinds of stuff, all kinds of bad things that are in that bloodline that was just going straight to me, to where, why would I have these thoughts? Why would I want to do this? Why? And some of these generational things being broken was huge. And we casted out so many things that at the end of it, I was just like, oh, I can breathe. Like, I have peace. God, and it wasn't like, it felt like it was this process where he was doing all these other things too, like surgery, spiritually and emotionally, and walking through these things. And this was like, even though deliverance is still, I think, like a daily thing, like, because things can happen, and you can get offended, or, doors can open because we're human. This was a huge step of getting these really big things cut off and casted out. And where the image that I always have with what I've gone through is, have you seen, oh my gosh, what is it? Chronicles of Narnia. I don't know if you've seen that, but when the brother went with the witch and he was completely dedicated to her, it's like he knew it was wrong somewhere in him, but it's like he almost got this place where it's just, I'm too far and I just got to stay with her. I'm seeing her true colors. That's how it was. I'm seeing Satan's true colors. I'm seeing what he wants to do and destroy my life. But at the end, whenever whenever God got into the situation, he basically set him free. And then she, like, there's a scene wherever, like, he's next to Aslan and she's like, he can't do that. He's already mine, and blah, blah, blah. And he went over there and made a deal and all that stuff. It's basically, he died on the cross for him. He died for him. And it's like, he no longer was bound to that witch. And God gave me this revelation during deliverance, is like, I have done all of this for you. And I got this revelation of, like, how much love and freedom I have because of what he did, and how big it was to me. Is like, he who has forgiven much loves much. And so it was like, I had this revelation that God did all of this for me, and all the stuff that I've done, he paid the price for it. And it's like this exchange. And so even though I had been very, very, very dark and had done probably, and it's not even everything I've done that I told you about, he paid the price for it, and his blood covered all of it. And just realizing how much love he has for me, that he forgave me for everything. I just get that picture of him looking like, he's like, no, like, I stood in your place. I stood in your place, and what is done is done. Like, so even telling, like, his siblings is like, what about what he did? And he's like, it's like, it's done. Like, it's finished. Yeah. Like, they didn't have to discuss it with him anymore.
Yeah. That's really good. So you obviously are gifted in evangelism, because you go on to do several things that are evangelistic, right? Whether it's telling your family about Jesus and them coming to know him, or it's everything with the lemonade stand story with your children, and then all that happened with that as well. Do you want to go into either of those?
Oh my gosh, yes. So when COVID hit, and a few years ago, right before actually COVID hit, my sister called me and she said my brother, that's in the Czech Republic, was not doing well. And he was pretty aggressive towards me growing up. Like, he did not like God. He hated God. He was like, always, and when people grow up in abusive homes, people react different. Some people get very angry and they get resentful towards God and aggressive. So when I called him, I didn't know, like, we've been praying for years for my family, like the church and me, my husband and friends. We've been praying for years for my dad and my brothers, my sister. So she's like, you need to talk to him. I think he's dying. And I was like, okay. So I call him, and I'm fasting and praying, but I'm fasting for the nation, right? I'm like, it's over the elections. I'm like, okay, we got to pray for the elections, and all this stuff. And that's what I thought the purpose of it was. I had no idea that God was preparing me for what was going to happen with my brother. So I talked to him, and he's like, I'm not doing good, Annetta. I don't think I'm going to make it. What had happened is somebody had given him a drug to help him physically. It was somebody from a doctor's office, but it wasn't a legit drug or something. Anyway, he took it. He was only supposed to take it for a couple of weeks, and he had taken it for 9 months. So his body was shutting down. His nerves were like messed up. He said like it felt like his body was like breaking. He was on the floor. He couldn't get up. That's like how bad he was. Like, I can't do anything, and I'm in so much pain. And so we were praying. I was talking to him. I'm praying yet. I was talking to him, and I said, well, I think Jesus is the only thing can help you. He goes, well, I think my Jesus is different than your Jesus. And I was like, there's only one Jesus, right? I was like, there's only one Jesus. But we talked, and I told him like what God wanted to do. And I was like, I think God wants to heal you and give you a second chance. And I think it was over two phone calls that we talked that week. And he had called me, I think it's like next day he had talked to me again. And I was like, this is the only thing that's going to help. And I was like praying, and I was like, let me pray for you and all this stuff. And I asked him if he was willing to accept Jesus. Right. And he said, he's like, yeah, I'm ready. And I was like, what? I was like, okay. I mean, he was Buddhist. He was he was into everything.
Wow.
And he, like I said, he hated God. So when I said, okay, well then ask God to forgive you for everything you've done. And I walked with him through the prayer, and I said, can you accept that he died on the cross and he rose again, and that he can live in your heart? And so he prayed all of it with me. And I was like, you're a Christian now. And he was like, oh, thank you. And then God started healing his body. Like his nerves started reconnecting. I actually went to a conference like that week, and I started sharing, and my brother called me in the middle of it. So I was able to go on the stage and be like, my brother said his nerves are healing as we're talking. And they just started coming back together. And then I would talk to him next week. He's like, Annetta, I'm off the floor. And I was like, that's awesome. He goes, Annetta, I'm exercising. I'm like, wait, what? He's like, I went on a run today. So it was like every day I talked to him, he's like, I got a job. And then like, I'm seeing my family again. And so it was like all these like step by step, all these things were happening where I was like, God, you're like real to him. And then he would start sending me little hearts. Like, he's like, thanks for praying for me. Heart. I was like, that's not my brother. What is that? And he's like, thank you so much for praying for me. And can you pray for this? And can you pray for this? And so we were talking nonstop for like months, like of just him saying, hey, I need this. Hey, and I could see the change in him. Like I could see the softness. Like he's like, I appreciate you. You're so, amazing. This and different things. And I'm like, oh, wow. So that happened with my brother. Right. And then my dad, I've been talking to him some, like when we got married, my husband and I got married, and my dad was walking down the aisle. Like I already, I'd forgiven him for everything. And I asked him to forgive me for stuff, because I was not the nicest person when I was going through this, and I was mean, so I asked him to forgive me for stuff too. But I was walking down the aisle, and somebody said they saw this darkness run off of my dad, like completely come off of him when he was walking down the aisle, because God's presence was so thick. Like it was just like worship was like, I was like, God, let your spirit be so thick that people that my family don't know you will know you. Right. So it was this amazing experience. And he tried out a church after that, but then he went back to Syria. And when he came back, he had one of these big idols that he put up on his wall. And I was like, oh, he stepped back into the Muslim stuff. So it was kind of like, man. So I've been telling him a little stuff in there, here and there. And I said, hey, are you a Christian? He goes, well, I've gone to church before. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, God started burning at my heart. He's like, you have to talk to him. Like you have to tell him about me. And this is, like I said, this is after my brother. So I'm always like already pumped. And I've been telling people, okay, now talk to my dad. And I call him and I'm like, hey, Dad, I was like, what do you think about Jesus and this and that? So we start talking. And I said, but have you accepted that he died on the cross for you and that he rose again and that he can give you a new life? And he's like, oh. And I go, do you want to do it? And he said, yes, I do. And I was like, what? So he prayed the prayer with me, right? And I did not know what was coming. But after the prayer, he's like, Annetta, I'm so proud of you. I was like, "Wah!" Which is like so huge because I was looking for his approval for so many years, but God was like using him. And God told me later, that was me too. Like, I'm so proud of you. And I was like, oh my gosh, thank you, Jesus. So what I didn't know was coming is that just a couple of months after he accepted Jesus, he was forced to get the vaccine, the COVID vaccine. And he did not want to get it, but he did. And 3 days later, his body started shutting down. And he started, like, he had gotten one, I don't know if it was a different type, like a few months before that, but he didn't want to do that either. But where he's at, he's like, you have to get this vaccine. So he was really adamant about not taking it. And they're like, you have to take this. And he was also, my mom was in a facility next to him. And so I think also like to be around her, it was just crazy. So he got that, he started going downhill, and then he just kept getting worse. And they took him to one hospital, and they took him to another, and he just started going downhill. Like his body just started shutting down. Well, my sister calls me one day while I'm at Bible camp with my kids and says, you need to come and see Dad. I don't think he has much longer. And I was like, oh my gosh, God, your plan. This is why God was like, you tell him now. Like, it was fire in my bones. You have to tell him about me. So I get there, and well, before I get there, I don't like planes. I've never liked planes, right? I'm different. Okay, like I'm going to claim, like, I'm good with planes at this moment. God's healed me. But at the time, I was petrified. And I was at Busch Gardens with my husband, and we went there after we found out that I need to go, right, to Texas to see my dad. And he's like, you have a choice. I can buy this ticket right now, or you could say you don't want to do it. And I was like, he goes, but you have to decide it. And I was like, ah. And I was like, okay, so I was like, you know what? I feel like God is saying to do it. So I'm going to do it. Go ahead, buy the ticket. And I bought the ticket, and I felt like it was this huge thing where my life could have gone this way or this way, like two totally different directions. Because I went to that plane, had a crazy panic attack. They were like all wearing their mask and everything. And they were like, they did the full check on me because they were, we don't know why this lady is uncontrollably sobbing. So I tell them, and she's like, I'm not supposed to do this, but can I give you a hug? I was like, yes. That's like the TSA agent. They don't usually hug you.
Yep.
And I get on the plane, and this guy is over there with the, like the mask. And he's like, somebody had theirs just below, he's like, put your mask back on, yelling at him. And I have my mask down, and he comes over, he goes, hey, how are you doing? I was like, good. He goes, good. Are you comfortable? I was like, yeah. He was like, good. I'll keep checking on you. Then he goes to the next person, put your mask on. He's like, he comes to me, and there's like this favor. Like he's just soft. And I'm not even obeying the rules either, right? I had it down because I can't breathe. I'm like, and he's like, no, you're fine. So I was like, so I get there, and the most amazing thing happens. I bond with my sister like I never have before. And I go and see my dad, and he's in the hospital. He can't move. And we go, like, I'll go back a little bit. I get there, we have to put on the full thing. Like, we have to put on the mask, we have to put on the shield, we have to put on the entire garb. We have to cover every inch of our bodies to go.
Because is he in a COVID unit at this point?
Yeah, he's in a COVID unit at this point. So they're actively dying over here. So they're like, you have to be completely covered every possible way. And so I'm like walking, and I remember as I'm walking over to the doors, I can hear the Lord say, though you walk, whoo, so I'll start crying. Though you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you fear no evil. And I could hear it like he's walking with me and my sister. And we go in, and then we go in to see my dad, and we play like his favorite music, and he wants Sweet Caroline, right? That's his favorite song. We get everything set up, and I actually start trying to leave because I get freaked out, and my sister looks at me, she's like, I need you. you have to stay in here with me. I have to have you. So I have to push past my flesh and what I want to do, which is to run. And I go back in and we work together. I get to pray over my dad, like, and just that God would be with him and all this stuff. I don't even know that I prayed. And my brother that's in the Czech Republic gets to say goodbye to my dad because we get the thing set up for him online, right? And I get done and I'm like, oh my gosh, my sister and I are super close now, and we go out and we sanitize because I was like, we're like, we don't get COVID, and we get to walk like through this together instead of her by herself, and me and Virginia, we're walking this out and getting all the doctor reports and what they want to do with him and if he can survive this and that. And then I realized if I had waited one day, I wouldn't have been able to see my dad face to face like that, because he was soon moved into another unit where he had to have the glass walls. So my brother that came in later, he couldn't even go next to his bed. He had to be out like in this glass, to say bye to him. So so it was me and then my two brothers and my one in the Czech Republic, all of us together and talking about growing up, and it was actually happy things. Like we were all laughing about stuff because even though it was an abusive home, there was also fun times. There was also things that we did as a family that was good, or we got to do things together and ski trips and different things. So we're talking, and then we get the phone call, and they say, she has on speaker, and she goes, "I'm sorry, but we couldn't save your dad." And I was like, "Ah." So they couldn't bring him back. And so but what God had already told me is he's not going to make it. Like before we were fighting for all this stuff and there was hope that he could make it, the Lord was already told me, he's like, he's not going to make it. So when that happened, I went to one of the bedrooms, and God gave me a picture of my dad. It was like whole, whole and healed and with Jesus. And I was like, oh, like I get to see my dad again one day. And so all the hurt, all that stuff, I mean, it just, all of it was just kind of like, oh my gosh, it's gone. Like I get to see him again one day. And God used me to bring him to himself. And it wasn't even because I'm all that. It was just prayers were answered. And so that happened. And then I get to go to the funeral, and I'm like, we decided to do it that weekend. We just make everything really fast because all of us are there. We don't want to make it spread out for a long time. So we end up going to the funeral, and I feel like God wants me to share. And everybody's like, I'm the baby in the family, so they're kind of protecting me and like, you don't have to share. And I was like, no, I think I'm going to. So I go up there, and I had to ask people to be praying. I mean, I'd be crying a lot. Like I'd be in the bathtub crying and all this stuff. And people from Virginia were calling and praying for me. And I get up there, like I walk up there to the microphone, and I said, I just need y'all to know that my dad accepted Jesus like a couple of months ago. And I just start sharing the gospel with them, like in front of all my family members, some that aren't saved, some that are, but it was just like this huge group, and I get to tell them. And then somebody comes to me after and they go, "I'm so glad your dad accepted Jesus." I was like, yes, I am too. And so I leave that trip just, it's like I'm so broken, but at the same time, like we even went to the mall, me and my brother and sister, and I got them to ride on these weird toys, like these animals that are supposed to be for like 6-year-olds. And so we were all riding the mall with these like stuffed animal motor toys. And so we got to bond in a way that we would not have bonded if I would have stayed trapped in my fear of flying. I would never have been able to say bye to my dad. I wouldn't have bonded with my sister. I wouldn't have had all these memories that I have with them now. And so that all happened. And then last year, my sister paid for me to come out so that we can have a happy time as a family. And my brothers came back, and it was, again, there's a whole other story there, but God set me free from the fear of flying on that trip. And whenever I went out there, I was petrified, and he had me watch The Chosen, where it's like, what do we do when we're afraid? And it's like, we looked at Adonai. And so he was like, look at me, look at me, look at me. And that's just an air bump. That's just an air bump. That's just an air bump. And by the time I got home, I was actually excited to get on a plane. I was like, when I was heading back to Virginia, I was like, I get to ride on the plane. I was like, what just happened? So it was like, I said yes again, even though I didn't want to because I was so scared of flying still. And I said yes. And I was like, look at all that I would have missed out on if I would have been petrified of getting on that plane again. Because then my sister, it was so much joy. We were full of laughter. We got to see my mom again. We got to make all these memories. Like I had so much joy, and it was the exact opposite of the trip before where we were bonded, but everybody was crying and everybody was sad. This one, we were all happy and we were excited of what the future was and all this stuff. So that was like up to, yeah, like last year. And then the lemonade stand. Yes. So that's a huge thing. Oh, I didn't tell you. Okay. I need to go back. After the trip, my sister calls me. And this is after the trip with my dad, right? So this was 3 years ago, 4 years ago. She calls me and she's talking to me about what happened with my dad. And then I said, John, I won't say her name, but anyway, I said, do you want to become a Christian? And she goes, oh, it's too late for me. And I said, no, it's not. And I said, well, what's stopping you? And she's like, I don't know. She's like, I just don't think I can do it. And I said, you could totally do it. And I said, God has plans for you and he wants to prosper you and all this stuff. And God's given me these words to speak to her. And I said, do you want to try? And she's like, okay. I was like, wait, what? And so she repeated after me and she accepted, that she's asked God to forgive her for everything she's done, that he would come that he died on the cross, that he rose again, that he can live in her heart and give her a fresh new life and start over. And she prayed with me. And I was like, you just became a Christian. And she was like, oh, like, so it was like back to back, like people in my family getting saved. And it had been a long road with, praying for her. And she had asked for prayer a few years ago. And it was just kind of softening. And then God just opened the door wide where it's like, she was ready. And then she stepped through and I was like, oh my gosh, you get to know Jesus too. And so this last trip was so sweet because that one that I went to just last year, because, I knew she was saved. My other brother's saved. There's one I'm still holding out for, but he's very close. But it's like all of them. And my mom rededicated her life. I forgot to mention that too. Yeah. So that all was happening. But yeah, the lemonade stand was totally I did not know what was coming on that. And my kids this was last August. I think that was, last August. They had been doing lemonade stands for years at our house. So my other kids have been doing them. We did them at our old house. I mean, this is like 12 plus years we've been doing lemonade stands. And we do garage sales randomly and stuff. Well, my daughter had just done one with her friend and my son like the other day before this. They'd set up the table. And anyway, I went inside to talk to my husband, right? They're out there on our driveway, right? I don't think anything's going to happen. And they're, 10 and 9. So they're not like super little, but I was like, ew. So I go in and right when I come in, this guy that had been canvassing our house, I didn't know, came up to them and pretended to be a customer and asked for lemonade. And she was like, okay, I'll give you some lemonade. And he was super friendly. So she turned, and as she turned to give him lemonade, he stole the entire jar of money and ran into his car and drove off. And I was like, inside, she came in to tell me, and she was bawling and she was hyperventilating. And my son was like, I don't know, she was just beside herself. And I'm like, what happened to you? And she was like, somebody robbed us. And I was like, no. So, and my adrenaline, I came running outside and I thought the truck that was leaving was the actual, the guy that stole it. So I was like, give me my kid's money back. And I was chasing. It was the wrong car. Thankfully, they didn't hear me. And then they just drove off. And they're just like, Mom, that's not the guy. He already left. So I was like, well, we're going to go find him. And they're like, Mom, don't do it. And I was like, no, we're going to find this guy. He can't steal from y'all. So I get in the car. my one daughter's like, okay, Mom, we're going to do it. And my other one is like, Mom, you can't do this. You can't do this. It's like the Holy Spirit, don't do this. And I start driving and the Holy Spirit was like, stop. You need to call the police. Don't chase him. Go turn around. And I was like, okay. So I called the police and within a few minutes they arrive. And then they're like, we're going to catch this guy. They didn't mess with kids. And they're in it. They're like, we're going to catch this guy. And I'm like, okay. And so then we put it on Nextdoor app. And when we do that, it starts blowing up. And he had mentioned, the officer said, hey, don't be surprised. Like in a couple of days, he said if some, like the news might reach out. Right. But days kept going and nobody was calling us. And I was like, God, can you please let my kids get on the news? I started praying for it. Right. And then he had also told me when he had me turn around, he goes, like, give this to me and see what I will do with it. And I was like, okay, I'll give this to you. So Nextdoor app starts blowing up and people start tagging Wavy 10. And before you know it, Wavy 10 reaches out and they ask to do an interview with my kids and us. So we're like, okay. So we do the interview. We get the lemonade stand set up. It looks awesome. And she does the interview and I'm like, that was the best experience. My kids got this and we got to be in it. It was great. And the next day I get a random phone call and she's like, hey, I'm so-and-so. I'm from Wavy 10. We want to do a second interview. And I'm like, okay. And I was like, well, when do y'all want to come? She goes, well, I'm at your door right now. I was like, you're at the door? She goes, yeah, my film director. I mean, my cameraman's here. So if you could spend a few minutes, we want to share about how you want to do the second lemonade stand. And so we go out there, my hair is all like, and I'm like, okay. And we do a second interview and we're like, all right, so we get this out. And all of a sudden we have News Nation reaches out and we're like, what News Nation is reaching out? They want to do an interview of what happened. And we're like, okay. So we tell them, and then we're going to be doing a lemonade stand, a second one. Because I had told my kids that's the other things I said, do y'all want to do this again? And, are you willing to forgive this guy? And, because it's important that we forgive him so we don't become bitter, right? So we have this whole conversation and they're like, yes, I want to do a lemonade stand. And my Joshua was like, I already forgave him, and I'm praying that he becomes a Christian. I was like, okay, So, and I was like, all right. So he ended up, and Becca ended up forgiving him too. And then all of a sudden we start getting more phone calls and then it's like, it starts growing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, now we got David Muir, asking if we could be on national news. And I'm like, okay. So we do a random video in the art room. I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm like holding the phone. Hey, what happened? Oh, we got to, okay. What do you feel? And they aired it on national news. I was like, and then the mayor shows up at my house and he's like, hey, I have an award I want to give your kids. I'm so sorry I didn't make it to your lemonade stand. I'm like, okay, that sounds great. Because I didn't even recognize it. I was like, okay, you're the mayor of Chesapeake. So he ends up planning something out with us. And then I didn't realize it, but we had that second lemonade stand. All the school board shows up, all these people coming in for re-election, like all these crazy like high ups, they're like showing up at our house, and we had like 120 motorcycles show up, and all like we raised over $6,500. And then in the mail, it was over 7,000 because people kept sending checks to us, and we were like, okay, and they're like, we just want your kids to know that there's good people out there, and they've been telling people they want four-wheelers, so we ended up getting four-wheelers from them with all the money. But yeah, we ended up meeting the governor and he sent a letter to us, but we got to do a photo op with him and then with Jen Keegan's, and then it's just one thing after another. And then as of like a couple of weeks ago, it started circulating again. So God, I had prayed, I was like, God, get my story out with the book. And all of a sudden people are asking if they could donate to our lemonade stand. I was like, this is from last August. What is happening? And they were like and this wasn't like just recirculating. Somebody wrote an article in Arizona, and then somebody did one in Pennsylvania, and then somebody in Florida, which the lady called to do another thing with us, another news reporting. And she goes, I don't know how your story was here because we have a little town and it was in our paper and it just showed up. Like, we don't even know how it got here. I was like, oh, that wasn't even from last year. Somebody did like a new thing. So God was just like revamping all of it,
Absolutely.
but he
And
turned
you
it
have,
around.
absolutely. And at the end of the book, which we should mention, the name of the book is called Caught. You can get it on Amazon, and you can follow Annetta online, and she has a YouTube channel. You have a supernatural healing that I was really not expecting at the end.
Oh
And
gosh, yeah.
yeah, could you tell us a little bit about what happened with that? And then we'll wrap up for today.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening
Oh,
to
no,
my
you're
title.
fine. Yeah.
So after the lemonade stand, I decided to do a hot cocoa stand to raise money for North Carolina flood victims.
Oh,
And I
yes.
like,
Yep.
let's give back and start doing that. Well, during that time, I start developing a cough that just won't go away. And I even had people like, maybe you should get that looked at. And I'm like, I don't like the doctor. So I'm not going to go to the doctor for this. Well, it kept getting worse and worse. And so I was like, okay, fine, I'll go to the doctor. So my husband had a little bit of a cough too. So we both went to like a now clinic. And when we went, they did x-rays and they checked us out and they said, we think that you just have a virus, and we'll give you some antibiotics to help with the cough and whatever, if there's an infection. So they give that to us. My husband and I both get through x-rays, and I'm like, great, I did this. I stepped out and I got the medicine. I'm going to feel better. Well, while I was even like after this, I wasn't thinking through it, but I would have trouble breathing. So I would be like putting my back, like, like when you're out of breath and you can't catch your breath, I would be that at sitting in the car. And I would be like, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. And I would be like, I would stretch my back just to try to get oxygen. And I was like, oh, this isn't good. Well, the doctor's office, while I was driving my son to work after a co-op, I get this phone call from the Now Clinic, and I have it on speaker, and I'm like, hey. She goes, hi. She goes, hi, Miss Caldwell, I just want to let you know that you have a 10 millimeter mass in your right lung. And I was like, what? And she's like, yeah, the radiologist found it, and you need to see your PCP, you need to get a CT scan, all this needs to happen right away. And I was like, wait, you mean like right away? Like, is this bad? She goes, well, yeah, it's concerning. And I was like, what? She goes, I said a 10 millimeter. She goes, yeah, 10 millimeter mass. And so, thank you. I was like, okay. And my son looks at me and he's like, what was that about? I go, they found a mass in my lung. And he's like, can you breathe? I go, well, I've had trouble breathing, but I thought it was just the infection, or I drop him off at work, so he's kind of like in shock, like, okay, my mom might have cancer, and going off to work. And I call somebody and I was like, hey guys, or I call her, I said, hey, they just found a mass in my lung, I'm freaking out, I'm having a panic attack. And I called my husband, he's like, you're probably fine, it's probably nothing. And he has to do that with me because I've struggled with hypochondria. He's like, you're probably fine. And I'm like, I don't think I'm okay. Like, they found a mass in my lung. So she's like, you come to the co-op and we'll pray, I'll pray for you. So I get to the co-op and I don't see her, but I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to get out and I'm going to go inside. I'm just going to brave it. And I'm going to go ask for prayer. So I go inside and somebody sees me and she goes, are you okay? And I'm like, no. And I start crying. So they bring me into a schoolroom and they start praying over me. And I'm like, they found a mass in my lung, blah, 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 all this stuff. She goes, well, you do have to get it looked at. And I was like, I don't want to, I don't want to go to the doctor. So I had to see my doctor in 5 years. I hadn't been anywhere like for like OB, all that stuff for like 7 years, right? I hate going to the doctor. So if I don't have to go, I don't go. So 5 years of not seeing him, he does not take new patients. So I said, guys, y'all gonna have to pray because he's the only one that I want to see, right? So I call them up after we've prayed, and other people come in and they're praying and they're, comforting me because it's kind of a shock that I just found out. So I call the doctor and she goes, well, I'm sorry, but we usually don't take new patients. And especially, you haven't been here in 5 years and he is booked, he can't take any new patients, but I'll ask what he says. And I go, well, they did just find a 10 millimeter mass and I'm only comfortable going to you guys. And can you think about it? And she goes, okay. So I hang up with her, still thinking about it, praying about it. And just put it in context, my husband hadn't seen the doctor in like 3 years, and they wouldn't take him back. And it took like 2 weeks to get back to him. Okay. So I get back inside. I'm like, oh, and I get a phone call, and it's the doctor within like an hour and a half or something. And she said, we decided to take you as a patient. And I was like, are you serious? She goes, yeah. So we'll see you next week. We got the time scheduled, everything. So we're praying. I'm like, this is not good. That weekend, which is a Saturday, my kids were invited to be in the Chesapeake Parade because of the lemonade stand. So we've been preparing for that. And me and Ryan are in it too, because I mean, we're a part of it also. So we're like, okay, we're going to be in, so now so this is like Thursday. I think this is Thursday. Yeah. When I find all this out, and I'm in total shock, and we're praying. And then the church says that they agree to pray over me on Sunday. Well, I'm like, God, I don't even know how to function. I feel like my life feels like a movie, and I'm like outside of it, because right now I don't know if I have like a 10 millimeter mass is pretty big for your lung. And I was like, I don't know if I have cancer. I don't know how long I have. I don't know what they're going to find in the CT scan. And I'm like, God, please let me get the CT scan before the doctor. I don't want a CT scan later and then have to carry this, right? So I pray and we pray, and the CT place actually gets me in the day before my doctor appointment the following week. Like, okay. So Wednesday, yeah. So like Wednesday is the appointment, the CT scan, and then Thursday is the doctor appointment. I think that's right. So I'm like, it was a miracle that I got in, because usually CT scans take a while, and they went ahead and saw me right away. So I get to Saturday, I'm still coughing a ton. I'm still struggling, right? And I have to be out in this parade and smile, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm dying. Hi guys. So I'm walking, and we're in this parade, and there's thousands of people at this parade, and it's like amazing. It's like a movie. I'm seeing people here, and people are like, can recognize us. I'm like, hey guys. And I'm like, wow, it's like we're on top of the world and at the bottom of the world at the same time. And my husband is having to carry this too. He's like, I don't, at this point, he's worried, because he doesn't know if it's cancer or not also. So we're like, we don't know what to do, but we're just going to keep pushing through. So we go through that parade. I randomly am crying. It's a shock to my system, because I just found out, and I'm still like freaking out. But we get to Sunday, and they get the elders to lay hands on me, and they said, we're going to pray over Annetta. They found a 10 millimeter mass in her right lung. And this isn't like, oh, the x-ray just shows, this is like official radiologist finding this. So it's kind of legit,
Sure.
And I got them, they got to praying, and they were like, one girl was like, God, we pray that you would dissipate this, with your fire. We pray your fire would come and dissipate this tumor. And they're praying all these things, and that they said, Annetta, you're going to live and you're not going to die. And they're just proclaiming all these things. Right. And I'm like, yes, 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 yes. And I get to Tuesday, and, what was it? That's at Co-op. And so people they're praying for me. They're getting words for me, all this stuff. And they're like, maybe you're supposed to go through this to help somebody, and maybe even the people at the CT place and all that. So I get to the CT place, and I don't like doctors and I don't like getting CT scan. I've never done it. So I'm afraid I'm gonna have a reaction and all that stuff. So I go in there, and I meet with this lady, and she won't let my husband come back. She said it has to be just me. And I'm like, oh, great. And so when I go back there, I tell her I'm afraid I'm going to have a reaction. She goes, well, if you have a reaction to the dye, we have somebody that will come over here and help you right away. And I'm like, okay. So I'm laying down. She goes, we're just going to put the IV in, just regular fluid, before we do the dye, so you can kind of just feel what it's like. And I was laying down, and I said, I've been talking to her about praying or something. I said, well, can you pray for me? And she goes, wait, you mean now? And I went, yeah, go ahead and pray for me. And I was just bold. I was like, just pray for me. And she was like, oh, okay. She's looking at me like, I don't usually pray for patients, but okay. So she starts praying that God would be with me in whatever this journey is, and help with me, and with the trial of what I'm going to be going through, all this stuff. Sure. And then she starts crying and she walks away. And I'm like, what is she walking away for? And then she comes back. So I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. That's not professional. So she prays again and then she walks away again. Like, oh my gosh. And then she lifts up her shirt and it's a cancer survivor shirt. And she said, this isn't, I go, did you have cancer? She goes, no, my mom has had cancer 3 times and my aunt just passed away from it. And I get checked regular for stuff. And she's like, this just means a lot. And she just, she couldn't stop crying. And I was like, oh my gosh, I was here for her. And I went from like, because I'm like over here, like, you're fixing to do the scan on me, but you're, you're like walking away and crying. And so she's like, you know what I'm going to do for you? I'm going to have you do the CT scan without the dye so you could feel it first. I don't think they're supposed to do that because it's like even extra money and stuff. So she had me go through it. And then she goes, okay, are you ready now for the dye? And I was like, okay. So she did the dye and then she did it. And I got done and I was like, I didn't have a reaction. She's like, you handled it perfect. Your body handled it perfect. And she then, I prayed for her and stuff. I not prayed for her, I hugged her and I was like, all right. And so I left and the next day is supposed to be the doctor appointment. So I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I going to sleep tonight? All this stuff. And I go to the doctor appointment. I don't know if you heard that Forrest Frank, it's going to be a good day.
Yeah.
It's going to be, well,
Yeah.
he does the Lemonade song too. So it's kind of popular right now, but I decided, I did it at school too, right before my appointment. I just came in blasting that music and I'm like, I'm just going to have a good day. God is good. And he's going to heal me. I'm just going to have a good day, and even though I would be like crying in the middle, I teach kindergarten science class. So I had to have a teacher help me a couple of times. I'm like, so I go to this appointment and Ryan's with me and we've been getting prayer still. And I'm like, I'm going to have a good day. And I was like, it's going to be a good day. And we come in and I'm doing good for a minute and they call me back. And before I even get to like sitting, I start crying and I'm like, oh my gosh, this could change our life. I don't know what they're going to find in that CT scan. I don't know what's going to come. And I look over at her and I said, so how bad is it? Do I have cancer? And she's like, hold on, let me look. And she goes, you don't have cancer. I can't even find it. And I was like, wait, what? She goes, they couldn't even find the mass. And I was like, wait, what? And she goes, well, did you go to like one of those cheap places? And I went, no, it was your clinic. She went, oh. And she just got quiet. She didn't say anything. She was like, oh, because there's this very, very, good technical and theirs is a really good place and connected officially with their doctor's place and everything. So I was like, oh, so I don't have cancer? She goes, you do not have cancer. And
you don't have a tumor.
And you don't have a tumor.
Yeah.
Yes. So he comes back and he goes, you have like a little, like 3 tiny ones somewhere in here, but I don't see a 10 millimeter mass. And I was like, wait, what? And he's like, I don't see anything. He goes, you can go, I go, well, I haven't seen you in so long. What about this? And I started having him check everywhere. I was like, what about this? He's like, we'll do full blood work. We'll do a full blood panel. You'll need to go and see, what was it? The lung doctor to find out, everything's okay. And he's going to thoroughly look at it, but you can go in 6 months to a year. I was like, wait, what? He goes, yeah, like there's no 10 millimeter mass here. And I was like, okay. So I'm ecstatic. And I called the church and I was like, they can't find it, and my friend was like crying. She was like, they can't find it. I'm like, 10 millimeter mass doesn't just disappear. And she was like, oh my gosh, because the church prayed before I got that CT scan, right?
They anointed you with oil. Like they did all the things they were supposed to do.
Yeah.
Healing wise. Yeah.
Yeah. They anointed me. The elders prayed for me, all that stuff. And anyway, I got to share at church. There's that picture of me on the stage. I was like, this is all in the span of 1 week. So it was like, I find out they have this mass on like a Tuesday or a Thursday. And the following Thursday, I find out it's gone. Like 1 week of like, I had so much compassion for people that go through chemo and then find, all this stuff. All of a sudden my heart is just like compassionate. I was like, oh my gosh. But I went to the lung doctor later, and he's like, "You have the healthiest lungs I've seen." And he's like, "You have these little, I can't even find them. It's like little tiny little thing here and there." But he's like, "I can't even find them all. Like there's like, they thought there was 4 little ones." He's like, "I can't even." He's like, "Your lungs are great. Your thyroid's great." Like, he's like, "You're so healthy." But I got to share with others, and I looked later at the scan. I showed my friend that does radiology work, and I was like, can you show me? Because my husband and I were talking, it's like, was it a misread or whatever? And so she looks at it and she goes, "Oh, it's right there." And I what? She goes, "Oh yeah, and that's so deep in your lungs, they couldn't do surgery." She showed me where she saw it on the original, and I was like, "Are you serious?" And she goes, "Yeah." She goes, "It's right there. I see it." She goes, "Yeah, and she goes, "That's a really bad kind because it's so deep in your lung that it would hurt, like, I guess the vessels and different." She says they couldn't actually do surgery on you if you had it still. And yeah, I see it right there. And I was like, "Oh my gosh." So so God healed me, and I got invited to do that dance for Christmas Eve, and I had so much joy because I was like, "God, you healed my body." And it was like a week. Like it wasn't like the minimum we thought is I had to have surgery. Like that would have been the minimum because you can't leave a mass there in your lung. But the fact that God just supernaturally removed it, I was like, "Oh my gosh." Like I just, all of a sudden it was like life had a new meaning, and it's just like I'm not. And when you taste and when you feel like you're not going to make it, or that you're going to have to go through chemo and all these, and I if I would have, God would have given me the grace to do that, but he chose for some reason to take it away, and it had me face my fears of doctors again and the CT, and I felt like he took a lot of fear away because I had to face the CT scan. I had to do these things. But anytime the enemy tries to be like, "Oh, you're not healthy," I'm like, "Actually, they looked through my whole body, and no, I'm
And
healthy.
you're okay.
I'm okay. Even my thyroid, they said, was great, and all this
That's
stuff."
amazing.
And my blood work came back beautiful. He's like, "Your blood work is great. Like there's no sign of anything." And I was like, "Oh." And yeah, so it was great news. I was super thankful.
Well, this has been a wonderful and wild story, like just journey of hearing everything. And I just love how much joy you have. Like it's very apparent through the screen how much joy you have for the Lord and everything. And so, one last question is if you could tell others, which I know you've done, to pursue redemption and tell them about Jesus, what would you say?
I would say give Jesus a chance and just watch what he can do, because if he could take somebody like me that was in the depths of darkness and change my life around, he could do it for you.
Amen. Well, thank you so much, Annetta. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you.